To authorize the prosecution of a president for his official acts would open a Pandora's box from which this nation may never recover. Could George W. Bush be prosecuted for obstruction of an official proceeding for allegedly giving false information to Congress to induce the nation to go to war in Iraq under false pretenses? Could President Obama be potentially charged with murder for allegedly authorizing drone strikes targeting U.S. citizens located abroad?
I understand your position to be that a president is immune from criminal prosecution for any official act that he takes as president, even if that action is taken for an unlawful or unconstitutional purpose. Is that correct?
With an important exception, which is that if the president is impeached and convicted by the United States Senate in a, proceeding that reflects, widespread political consensus, that would authorize the prosecution under the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause. Okay. So yes, with that exception.
It seems to me that there are a lot of things that might not go through that process because it's quite a cumbersome process that requires the action of a whole branch of government that has a lot of different people involved. And so in your view, could a president sell pardons or sell military secrets? Those are official acts, right? It's an official act to grant a pardon. It's an official act to communicate with a foreign government. And such a president would not be subject to criminal prosecution?
The sale of pardons example is an excellent example because there were allegations about a sale of a pardon, essentially, when it came to President Clinton's pardon of Mark Rich. And the U.S. DOJ carefully considered, and for the very reasons we've emphasized in our brief, decided not to prosecute President Clinton with that because it raised concerns about whether or not a president can be prosecuted for his official acts. There's actually an op-ed in the National Review from Andrew McCarthy.
But your position is that he can't be prosecuted for that unless he's impeached.
Yeah, that was, as long as it's an official act. I mean, certain cases, purely private conduct under Clinton against Jones, he'd be subject to prosecution for that so long as he's not in office. But as long as it's an official act.
Could a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? That's an official act in order to seal Team 6?
He would have to be and would speedily be, impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution.
But if he weren't, there would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that?
Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury against Madison and our constitutional tradition and the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not...
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is no.
My answer is qualified yes. There's a political process that would have to occur under the structure of our Constitution, which would require impeachment and conviction by the Senate. In these exceptional cases, as the OLC memo itself points out from the Department of Justice, you'd expect a speedy impeachment and conviction. But what the founders were much more worried about than using criminal prosecution to discipline presidents was what James Madison calls in Federalist number 47, the newfangled and artificial treasons. They were much more concerned about the abuse of the criminal process for political purposes to disable the presidency from factions and political opponents. And of course, that's exactly what we see in this case.
But you're saying a president could sell pardons, could sell military secrets, could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival.
Sale of military secrets strikes me as something that might not be held to be an official act. The sale of pardons is something that's come up historically and was not prosecuted.
But your brief says that communicating with an executive branch agency is an official act. And communicating with a foreign government is an official act. That's what presidents do.
They're very strong situated. Those are very strong examples of potential official acts. If you look at what Chief Justice said against Madison, he said, arising directly under Article 2, Section 1, that the courts, that the president's official acts are, quote, never examinable by the courts. And he says it like 4 different times on pages 164 to 166.
Well, let me ask you about that then, counsel, because your position is, as I understand it, if a president is impeached and convicted by Congress, then he is subject to criminal prosecution, correct?
That would be a necessary said to prosecution.
Is that a yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so therefore he's not completely and absolutely immune, because under the procedure that you concede, he can be prosecuted if there's an impeachment and conviction by the Senate.
Very, very formidable structural check against the astonishing and radical action of prosecuting a former president with official acts.
Correct, but you're conceding that presidents can be criminally prosecuted under certain circumstances.
Specifically, if they're impeached and convicted, I think that's the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause.
Never in our nation's history until this case has a president claimed that immunity from criminal prosecution extends beyond his time in office. The president has a unique constitutional role, but he is not above the law. Separation of powers principles, constitutional text, history, precedent, and other immunity doctrines all point to the conclusion that a former president enjoys no immunity from criminal prosecution. At a minimum, this case, in which the defendant is alleged to have conspired to overturn the results of a presidential election, is not the place to recognize some novel form of criminal immunity.
By weaponizing the DOJ against his political opponent, me, Joe Biden has opened a giant Pandora's box. As president, I was protecting our country and doing a great job of doing so, and the historians will be saying that, they already are. But just look around at the complete mess that crooked Joe Biden has caused. He's the worst president in the history of our country by far. He's also the most corrupt president. The least I'm entitled to is presidential immunity, just like any other president would get. I'd be the only one that they would even consider not giving me immunity, because for whatever reason, people are angry that I've done such a good job, and I've replaced people that were corrupt, that were supposed to be president. So take on the fake Biden indictments. They're all Biden indictments. These aren't indictments, as we say, like God coming down from heaven and saying you did something wrong.